Who wants our stuff?
Chaim,
How many
everyone.
Me. Six. How many pieces do we have? Four. How many pieces do we have? There's 6 kids, right? How many pieces?
So, the last few years, I have an interesting phenomenon that there are periods of time when, on a daily basis, like 10 or more currencies are brought into existence, cryptocurrencies, right? Most of them don't last very long, right? What? Of course. Today, there are over 9,000 different cryptocurrencies. 2 years ago, there was actually more, so almost 11,000. Now, a lot of them went out of style. What? Yes, you can stop. You got to be quiet. However, before, if you go back 20 years, it was actually pretty rare for a new currency to be created. In the entire world, there's only about 180 currencies that are actually used, non-cryptocurrencies. However, in this week's Parsha, we have the introduction of a new currency. The Torah starts off. This week's Parsha starts off with the counting of the Jewish people, and Hashem tells Moshe how to count the Jewish people, and he says, Zeh yitnu. This is what the Jewish people should give. They should give a half a shekel with the holy shkalim. And he continues, Esrim geira a shekel. A shekel is 20 geira. Machtis a shekel truma Hashem. A half a shekel should be given as a donation for Hashem. So the question is asked, first of all, why does the Torah have to tell us exactly all about a shekel, exactly how many geira it is, and why does it start off, this is what they should give, and there are a lot of different explanations that are given. There are many different explanations that are given for this. The Ramban and some other commentaries explain that Hashem was telling Moshe to mint a new type of coin, a new currency, the shekel currency. It was called shekel because shekel means an exact weight, and the word shekel. And Moshe was to create this new currency called the shekel. Now we would think this is a currency we're familiar with, right? Today they use shkalim in Eretz Yisrael, right? Throughout our history we've used the shekel. But no, the Gemara tells us that actually the shekel in this week's portion that the Jewish people gave was different from the ordinary shekel that was used in Eretz Yisrael in the time of the Second Temple. It was known as the holy shekel, shekel HaKodesh. What's the difference between a regular shekel and a shekel HaKodesh? So, a shekel HaKodesh was worth double, twice as much as a regular shekel. So when the Torah says that you should give half a shekel, it actually means you should give a full shekel, but in the holy shkalim, which are double, it ends up only being half a shekel. So it seems a little bit strange. Why does the Torah have to create this new special currency and tell us that there's this double currency and you should give half of the double currency instead of just telling you to give a normal shekel? Right? That's what they're giving. They're giving a regular shekel, right? And they brought it to the Beis HaMikdash, but instead of calling it a regular shekel, we double the currency and we call it half a shekel. What's the purpose of this? Why do they need to give half? Why not a whole? Right? So one of the explanations that's brought down is that it's connected to the sin of the golden calf, which the Jewish people sinned by treating half a day as if it were a full day. They're supposed to wait, till the Moshe was supposed to come out sometime during the 40th day, and when it was halfway through the day, the first half of the day, they already decided the day is over, and they went and they created the golden calf. So this is the connection. That's one of the connections that's brought down. One of the reasons why they have to give half a shekel, but it doesn't seem really to be a strong connection between the two. So the Medrash tells us that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi once met Eliyahu Hanavi. Or not once, many times that he met Eliyahu Hanavi. But during one of their encounters, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi turns to Eliyahu Hanavi and he says, "My friend, Eliyahu Hanavi, what do you do? How do you spend your time?" And he says, "Well, I'm very busy. Hashem sends me on a lot of different missions." So he says, "Do you mind if I tag along? Do you mind if I tag along with you, Eliyahu Hanavi? I want to travel around with you. I want to see what you do. I want to get to know you. I want to see how you spend your time." Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says to Eliyahu Hanavi, So Eliyahu Navi says, what?
The bank deposits and withdrawals.
So he tells him, you can come, but there's one condition. No questions. No questions. The second you start asking questions, you gotta leave. So he says, okay, fine. So he goes with Eliyahu Navi and they begin their travels. They travel. They begin traveling, and that night they come to a little village, and they're looking for a place to stay. Now there's this elderly couple, this old Jew lives in this village, and he sees, two strangers passing by. He comes out and he invites them to come to his house to stay with him. They come to his house, a tiny little house, it's a little shack. Doesn't look like a very wealthy person, but this elderly man and his wife, even though they don't have a lot of food in their house, they take half of the food they have and they give it to their guests, and they give them they give them the best beds they have in the house, and they themselves, I guess, slept on the floor, and they treated their guests very, very well. Early the next morning, Eliyahu Navi wakes up Rabbi Yeshua, and he says, "Get up, we gotta go." Okay, get up, we gotta go. No questions. They get up early in the morning. They go outside, and they walk around the back of the house. And in the back of the house, there's a little barn, and there's a cow. Right? The cow provides milk for the family. This is their parnasa. And Eliyahu Navi stands next to the cow. He pulls out a siddur and he starts to pray. And Shimon Levi is a little curious what's he praying. He bends over a little bit, and he hears, "Please Hashem. Please Hashem, take this cow away." The cow collapses on the floor dead. Okay, Shimon Levi is very curious, but he says, "Eliyahu, what's going on? No questions? No questions? Okay, no questions." Fine. They continue their travels. They go to the next town. They come to the next town, and they're looking for a place to stay. And they see this big, fancy, beautiful house, big mansion. And they go up and they knock on the door. This rich man comes out. He opens the door, and he's like, "What? Riffraff, some guests over here? I don't take any guests. Go find somewhere else to stay." And he said, "Please, we need somewhere to stay. We're guests. We're strangers in this town. Could you please, can we stay by you?" And he says, "Well, if you want, you could sleep outside on the grass outside the house." Okay, fine. They lay down on the grass next to the house. And there's a little bit of noise as they're getting ready for bed. And they look at the back of the house and they see some construction work going on. It seems like they're doing some renovations in the back of the house. One of the walls was a little broken and they were fixing it up. So, okay, fine. They wait till they finish working. They go to sleep. Early the next morning, Eliyahu Navi again wakes up Rabbi Shua and Levi. He says, "We got to go." So they get ready to go. And before they go, Eliyahu Navi says, "1 second, let's go around the back of the house." They go to where the construction is taking place. And Eliyahu Navi pulls out his siddur again, and he starts to pray. Rabbi Shua and Levi listens, what's he praying for now? And they pray, what is he praying for? And he listens and he hears, "Please Hashem, help him finish the construction project." Right? Under budget and on time, right? Immediately, it's a whole group of angels descend from heaven, and they finish the whole project, and the wall looks beautiful. And I'm sure Levi's like, "Well, what's this?" No questions. Okay. They continue traveling. They come to the next town. As they're about to walk into the next town has a wall around it. There's a guard at the door, and they say, "We'd like to come in." And the guy's like, "Sorry, no guests, no strangers in this town. We don't let guests in this town." No guests in this town. Can we talk to somebody about this? Can I talk to your manager? Is there something we could, maybe we could work this out? They bring down the mayor of the town comes down. He's like, "I'm sorry, this is a policy we have over here. We don't allow any guests. If you know somebody here is one thing. If you have relatives, but strangers are not allowed in here." Okay, fine. We'll go somewhere else. And they turn to leave, and Eliyahu Navi turns back to the mayor of the town, and he says, "I want to bless you." He says, "I bless you that your town should have many great leaders." Okay, surely a little surprised. And so they go to the next town, and this town they're a little bit nervous how they can let them in. And this town immediately a whole welcoming committee comes out to invite them into the town. They give them a place to stay. And they give them food and everything for the night. And the next morning, as they're leaving, again, Eliyahu Navi turns to the people of the town. He gives them a bracha. He says, "One great leader should arise in your city and lead you." So Shimon Levi had enough. He says, "That's it. I'm sorry. I have questions." Eliyahu Navi said, "We had a deal. You have questions. You can't travel with me." "Okay, I'm not going to travel. I have traveled with you enough. Okay, I got to know. I have a lot of questions. First of all, I need you to explain to me what happened with that cow." So he says, "Well, I'll explain to you. This couple is a very nice couple, but when we were staying in their house, I saw that this man's wife, we're already an elderly couple, and her time had come to leave the world. So I davened. I wanted they're such kind people. I didn't want this old man to lose his wife. So I tried to figure out what I can do, and I realized that I could exchange the life of the cow for this man's wife, to give her some extra years. So that's what I was praying for." Okay, that's interesting. What about this rich guy who's was doing construction, and you had the construction project finished for him? He says, "Oh yeah, well when we were passing through his house, I looked down and I noticed under his house, apparently the previous owner, another would also been a very rich man, had buried a treasure under the house. And I saw that during the construction project, they would discover the treasure. I didn't want them to find it. So I had the angels come down to finish the construction project. And I made sure they did a pretty shabby job. That within a few years, the whole thing would collapse. But by that time, he's not going to have enough money to fix it up. And he's never going to find the treasure." Okay, fine. Makes sense. What about the two towns? The first town, you said they should have many great leaders. Second town, who were so nice to us, he said they should only have one good leader. He said, "What's your question? That's the greatest blessing, is that a town has one strong leader who leads the people. If everybody in town is a leader, then things don't work out very well, right? If you have too many leaders in a city." So when we look at the story, when we look at what's going on, right? We're not traveling with Eliyahu Navi, but Hashem is running everything in the world, and a lot of times we see things happening in the world, and we don't understand. It looks strange. Why is this? The cow is dying. What's going on? Why do we have the question? Because we don't see the full story. We don't see the whole picture. We only see half of the story. We don't know what's really going on, and as long as you only see half of the picture, you can't understand the reason behind everything. If you want to know why things are happening, you have to know all the details. You have to see the full picture. Right? The Gemara tells us that Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Akiva were traveling, and they were passing near Rome. And they heard the great commotion coming from the city. A great commotion. It sounded like a big party was going on. There were probably some big games going on in the arena over there, right? The gladiators, I don't know, some serious partying was going on in the city. And the rabbis, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and Rabbi Yeshua began to cry. And Rabbi Akiva started to laugh. And they turned to Rabbi Akiva and they say, "Why are you laughing?" He says, "Why are you crying?" And he says, "Well, I'm crying that these Romans who just finished destroying our Beis Hamikdash, they're having such a good time, right? They're enjoying themselves. They're having such big parties." He says, "That's exactly why I'm laughing. Can you imagine if these wicked Romans are having such big parties, are enjoying themselves so much? Can you imagine how much the Jewish people who spend their time studying Torah and doing mitzvahs, can you imagine how great our parties will be, right? How great our festivals, our enjoyment is going to be in the future." The Gemara continues that they continued traveling, and somehow they made it all the way from Rome to Eretz Yisrael. I don't know if it was the same trip or a different trip. And they passed by the Temple Mount. And as they're walking by the Temple Mount, they see it's completely destroyed. The Romans had actually plowed the whole area of the temple. And they see a little hole in the ground, and a fox is coming out of the hole. And the rabbis start to cry. And again, Rabbi Akiva starts to laugh. They tell him, "Why are you laughing?" He says, "Why are you crying?" And he says, "Well, this is the holiest place in the world. The greatest tzaddik, Moshe Rabbeinu, is not allowed to go in over here. Right? The greatest tzaddik of the Jewish people is not allowed to go here. Only the Kohen Gadol was allowed to go here once a year. This is the Holy of Holies. And now there are foxes building houses over here." digging tunnels over here? He says, that's exactly why I'm laughing. We have two prophecies that are written about the Beis HaMikdash. We have the prophecy of Uriah, who prophesied in the time of the first temple, right? Uriah prophesied that Zion will be plowed like a field. And we have a second prophecy of Zechariah in the time of the second temple, who said that in the future, after the long exile, Yerushalayim will once again be settled, and there will be elderly men and elderly women sitting in the streets of Yerushalayim. And there will be children playing in the streets. And then we have a third prophecy of Yeshayahu, who says that that Hashem sent two witnesses to testify about the Jewish people, Uriah and Zechariah. And it seems that there's some sort of connection between Uriah and Zechariah, right? What's the connection? They're two prophets who lived in two different time periods. So why does the verse connect them? To teach us that we can, when we see Uriah's prophecy coming true, when we see the prophecy of Uriah, prophecy that that the Beis HaMikdash is going to be plowed like a field, and that there are going to be foxes walking around in the place of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and we can be sure that the prophecy of Zechariah, who speaks about the rebuilding of Yerushalayim, will also be fulfilled. So Rabbi Akiva says, when I look at the Roman partying, I don't just see the parties of the Romans. I see the reward that Hashem is going to give to tzaddikim in the future. When I see how the Beis HaMikdash is completely destroyed, I don't just see the destruction. I see the second prophecy. I see the bigger picture. I see that this is part of a process that will eventually lead to a much greater rebuilding of a third and eternal Beis HaMikdash. And this is something which is hard for us to understand. We don't see the whole picture. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman spent the end of his life during the Holocaust in the city of Kovna, and he watched the Holocaust unfolding around him, right? The destruction, the death unfolding around him, and this was something even in the long history of the Jewish people. This was an event that stood out. And his students who were with him, they said, Rebbe, we've always had the question, how could Hashem allow such things to happen? But look around, look at the world around you. How could Hashem allow such things to happen? How could we say that Hashem is running everything in the world? So Rabbi Chanan says, I can't answer your question, but I can give you a parable. I can give you a mashal to help you understand. There was a scholar, a wise man, who grew up in a big city, and he spent all of his time studying. But because he grew up in a big city, he was never exposed to agriculture. He never was in a field at a farm, and every morning he used to go out to the bakery and he used to buy a loaf of bread. But he didn't know how the bread is made. And one day he decided he wants to study agriculture. So he goes out to a farm somewhere outside of the city, and he decides he's going to spend some time watching how they go about their job. So the farmer takes him out the first day into a field. He sees a nice, beautiful field. There's nothing in the field, but it looks like a nice area. You can build something nice over there. And the farmer brings out his cow, and he takes this plow and he sticks it into the ground. And the cow starts to move, and it starts to turn over the entire soil. And he looks at the farmer, and he's like, are you crazy? You had this nice, beautiful area. You could build a nice house over here, and you're destroying it? You're just like mixing up the whole earth over here? What are you doing? And the farmer's like, don't worry. In time, you'll understand. The next day, or a few days later, after they finish plowing the field, the farmer brings him out again. He brings out a big sack of wheat. And he takes the wheat and he starts throwing the wheat into the holes in the ground that he had just created. And again, this wise man starts yelling at him, are you crazy? You're taking good wheat, you can make good porridge out of this, and you're throwing it into the ground? What's going on over here? And he says, patience, wait, in time you'll understand. Right? And after he finishes throwing the wheat in the ground, he starts covering up the wheat with dirt. And again, he's yelling at him, what are you doing? He says, good wheat, you're not just throwing it in the ground, you're now covering it up. And again, the guy just ignores him now. By now, the farmer is not even answering his questions. And then the farmer takes a bunch of dung and manure and starts throwing it on top of the wheat. Right? And he's yelling, he's standing there screaming at him, "Are you crazy? You're wasting good wheat. You're destroying your field." And of course, it was only a few months later when the wheat started to grow and he saw the growth that came out of it. Right? But even then, he sees the farmer taking the wheat, cutting the wheat, and putting it into between these two stones and starts crushing it up into flour. Apparently, he's never been in a bakery before at all, but right, he starts smashing up right, only in the front, right? Yeah, okay, only saw bread, and he starts yelling at him, "This good wheat! What are you smashing it up into this powder, this dust?" Right? And it's only later that he realizes that this is how you make bread. So Rabbi Chanan says this man was not a foolish person. He was a very wise person. But as long as he was only familiar with the first half of the story, there's no way for him to understand where this is going. So we only see part of the picture. We don't see the whole picture. We only see half of the story. We don't know what the end is. The day will come when we will see the full picture. And at that point, everything will make sense. Everything will be perfectly clear. And this is really what's going on over here. The Machzis HaShekel there were two different types of donations for the Mishnah. There was the general donations, the gold, the silver, and copper. This represents our service of Hashem in general, our study of Torah and doing mitzvahs. And then there was a separate donation of the half a shekel. That was used not to make the Mishkan itself, but to make the foundation of the Mishkan, to make the adon and the sockets that held up the Mishkan. And in our service of Hashem, that represents the foundation of a Jew's service, which represents our emunah and our Kabbalah soil, our acceptance of the yoke of Hashem and our belief that Hashem runs the world. Now, when it comes to accepting that Hashem runs the world, we all have questions. We all have problems, right? There are things we don't understand. How could Hashem run this world? We look around the world today. How does it make any sense that Hashem is running it? Right? I would think the biggest fool is running the world today. Right? Who's in charge over here? Right? Who's in charge?
Can I talk to the manager?
Who's in charge over here? Right? So the Torah comes along and it tells us, Hashem says to Moshe, the reason why you have all these questions is because you think you have a full shekel. You think that you're looking at the whole picture. Our coin, that we think is a full coin, Hashem tells us, no. When we're dealing with Shekel HaKodesh, when we're dealing with the holy currency, it's actually twice as much as what you think it is. It's twice as much as your ordinary currency. And what you have, if what you see as the full picture, is really only half the picture. What you see as a full shekel is only half a shekel. Right? And this was the mistake of the Jewish people at the Egel. They look at a half a day, and they think it's the full day. Right? They see Moshe's, the image of Moshe in heaven, and they think it's over. We understand what happened. We understand. They don't know what's going on in heaven. They don't know what Moshe was doing up on the mountain. But they jumped. They thought that they saw everything. Right? They saw a little image, and they thought they had the whole picture. And that's how they made a mistake. And the atonement for the sin of the Egel, for the sin of the golden calf, is for us to realize that what we consider to be the full shekel is really only half a shekel. And right now we don't see it, but one day we will. The Chayza of Lublin had a student, his name was Rav Shimon Yaroslav. And he wrote a book on the Torah called Torah Shimon. And he lived to the age of 93, which even today is a pretty good age to live to. But going back 150 years, it was a very unusual thing for somebody to live to the age of 93. So he was asked in his old age, what did you do to merit to live so long? This is a common thing. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody good lives long and people who aren't good don't live long. But there was a custom among our sages that when somebody lived to an old age, they would ask him, what special merit do you have that allowed you to live so long? So Rav Shimon told his students, I'll explain to you why I'm living so long. Most people, right, he lived through a very difficult time. He said most people live through this time and they have a lot of questions on Hashem. They say, Hashem, what are you doing? Why are you running the world like this? Right? So Hashem says, listen, while you're in this world, you know how to understand. If you have questions, come up here. I'll bring you upstairs, and I'll answer all your questions. And every day, people are going, Hashem, I don't understand. So after a while, Hashem gets sick of them. After 50 years, Hashem's like, you don't understand. You want to speak to the manager, we'll bring you upstairs, and you can understand. I'll explain it to you. Right? But in my life, he said, I never had any questions. I said, listen, I don't need to understand. So Hashem never felt the need to bring me upstairs and explain it to me. Right? And this is the message that Torah is giving us with a half a shekel. Hashem tells Moshe, I want you to mint this new currency. I want the Jewish people to know that the regular shekel that they have is what they think is a full shekel, is really only half a shekel. And every time we have a question, we have to realize that the reason why we have a question is because we think that we have the whole shekel. We think we see the whole picture, but we're really only seeing half. If we would see the whole picture, the questions would disappear. And just to conclude with a final story, there was a young man in Beit Shemesh who became a chassan, right? He got engaged, and it was, he had to start preparing for the wedding. But he didn't have any money. Family didn't have any money. And, the wedding is very expensive. Wait a few more minutes. So, okay, we have a lot of stories. We're going to say a few stories. Okay? We're going to say one more story here. We said already a few. We're going to say one more. So this chassan, this young groom has to now start putting together money for his wedding, not just for his wedding. After his wedding, he's going to sit in kollel for a year studying. He's going to have to support his family, and he has to find a way to get money to fundraise. So in Israel, it's not that easy to fundraise. So he does what many of his friends did. He traveled to America to raise funds for his wedding. Right? Came down to Miami, came to all the shuls over here. So he comes down. I don't know exactly where he was, somewhere in America. The story doesn't say where it was, but let's say it was Miami, right? He comes down to Miami, and he doesn't know anybody in Miami. He doesn't know where to go. He doesn't know what to do. So he did what everybody does. What do all the collectors that come here do? They find a good driver, right? A good driver. Now, what's the driver? The driver's job is not just to drive you around, but the driver's job is he has a big list with all the names, everybody who lives here, everybody's name. Not only everybody's name, he knows exactly how much money everybody has and how much money everybody gives and what causes they give to and the best hours to reach them and the best way to approach them. And he takes this guy around, right? He takes this guy to a different house. He gives him a list of names. He tells him exactly where to go to, a list of addresses. And he tells everybody where to go. And of course, he takes a good percentage for himself, right? And this is how it works. I'm saying people come here every day, right? How many people come into the shul every day for, they have the list. They know exactly where they're going, right? Some people I don't know if anyone here is lucky enough to have them actually knocking on their door. Me, they already know it's not, it's not worth it. We go once in a while, I guess, when they're really desperate. But there are people who, their name is on the list and they come every day to their house. What? Half a shekel, yeah. So this chassan he's going around with the driver, drives him a list. He goes to the different houses. He comes to this big, beautiful mansion, and he knocks on the door. The rich man comes to the door. He opens the door and he sees this beggar, this collector over there. He starts yelling at him. You good for nothing parasite! Sitting and learning all day, and you expect me to pay your bills? What do you think? I'm going to travel all the way to America and you take my money that I worked hard for so that you could go back to Israel and sit in yeshiva and learn all day? Why don't you get a job? Why don't you work? Why don't you make a living? Why don't you learn to support your family? He's yelling at me, starts cursing him out. And this goes on for 5 minutes. And this young man is just standing there the whole time. He's not answering. He's just smiling. He's like nodding. Yeah. Right? And it goes on for 5 minutes. Finally, after 5 minutes, the guy is tired of yelling. He says, listen, I don't approve of this whole thing of you guys driving me crazy, knocking on my door. But listen, you came here. You came all the way down here. I can't turn you away empty-handed. He pulls out his checkbook and he writes him a $300 check. The guy says, thank you, and he turns around, he starts leaving, and the rich man pulls him back in, and he says, I have a question. I spent the last 5 minutes screaming and yelling at you. You didn't get angry, you didn't try to leave, you didn't yell back at me, you just nodded and you smiled the whole time. How did you do that, right? What type of, what type of behavior is this?
You learned this in yeshiva.
Is this what they, where do they teach you this? So the groom, the chassan, smiles at him. He starts laughing. And he says, I'll show you, he says. He reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out his paper, right? He has a list of names, right? He shows him, he says, Chaim is going to give you $50, Shimon is going to give you $20, and not only does it say the list of people and what they're going to, how much they're going to give, but it has information about them, right? It says Baruch is going to ask you to tell him a Dvar Torah. Tell him a good Dvar Torah is going to give you $60, right? Yankel's going to give you $20, but if you tell him a good story, or you tell him a good joke, he's going to give you $50. And then he tells the rich guy, here's your name. Look what it says next to your name. So he's going to yell, shout, and curse at you for 5 minutes, and then he's going to give you $300. Right? So when somebody yells and curses at us for 5 minutes, if we know the end of the story, right? If we see the whole picture, there's no reason to get upset, right? There's no reason to get angry or yell, right? You could sit there and nod with a smile because you know what comes next, right? And this is what the Torah is telling us. The reason why we get upset, the reason why we have questions, the reason why we have doubts, the reason why this foundation, this emunah, is so hard for us is because we only have a half a shekel, but we think we have the whole shekel. As soon as we realize that what we have is really only half a shekel, as soon as we realize that this guy is good, that in this world they're going to yell and scream and curse at us for 5 minutes, and then they're going to give us $1 million, right? Then it's so much easier, right? Everything makes sense. So that's what we all have to realize, that whatever we see in our life, whatever the shekel that we see in our life is only half a shekel. And one day we'll see the full shekel, the shekel HaKodesh, and we'll see all the blessings that come from it. L'chaim, l'chaim.